What is up, guys? Vosik Aksis here, and today we are going to be reviewing the Rise of Iron expansion for Destiny. Now you may be thinking, why the heck are you doing a review now? The Rise of Iron has been out for several months, but that's actually the point. The way Destiny's expansions are designed, content trickles out over time, and it would be unfair of me to rush out a review in the first few days and not even experience things like the hard mode raid or challenge modes or other, again, content that has come out after the actual release date of Rise of Iron. And that's really why I'm making this video today. Last week, we got the second Iron Banner, and we also got the final challenge mode for the Wrath of the Machine raid, the Aksis Challenge Mode. So I have been able to play and judge pretty much every piece of content the Rise of Iron expansion has added in Destiny. So there's no argument that things are yet to come. What we paid for has been released, and that's why I'm making the review today. Now, the downside of doing so is that this review is likely to get lost in the massive amount of reviews that were rushed out. If you appreciate me doing this, please remember to support this video by simply rating and sharing. And now, let's start the review. And we're going to start off here in the story mode, in the main story campaign missions that came with the Rise of Iron. Now, although there was some legitimately interesting story elements and some legitimately fun moments and missions, for example, the final boss fight in the last Iron 2 mission was actually, I think, pretty hectic and pretty enjoyable as an actual event in-game. I think that overall there really is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This story mode was yet again lacking. And it really does kind of blow my mind, or maybe I should say it doesn't blow my mind at this point, that one of the main criticisms of Destiny has always been that it hasn't exactly had the best story elements for a game. And yet we have in this newest expansion, Bungie still making the classic mistakes they keep making. Firstly, the story campaign was just very short. Although there is much more to do after the actual main story campaign. You have specific missions to get exotics, you have the strikes, you have PvP, you have the raid. There's more to do, but the actual storyline is incredibly short, can be beaten in a little over an hour if you go hard at it. And that was definitely disappointing. Bungie should have done a little bit more in terms of having more actual missions to do, or just extended the lengths of the current missions. Because having a main story completable this quickly is just going to have people say, that's it. Now, it would be a little different if it was short and sweet. They packed a lot of cool information, cool set pieces, cool encounters into this small story, but unfortunately they really didn't. Don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed the content of this storyline more than others. I thought the fact that you were fighting a remade Sepkus was actually pretty cool in the first mission. Some people, lambasted the game because they're recycling stuff, but it does make sense for the narrative that the Siva is coming back infecting stuff that we thought we killed, and it's coming back even more powerful with different abilities. That, to me, I'm actually okay with. And so again, you did have a very interesting element. The design of Siva, the actual implications of it in the story mode was pretty cool. But yet again, Bungie makes the same pitfall where they just don't have time to explain why they don't have time to explain. Several times during the mission, there was stuff that was alluded to but never explained. We finally got to see the Iron Lords. Saladin talking about the Iron Lords, all he really said was they're an ancient order. This was the perfect time to tell us more about this ancient order. I would have loved to have some dialogue where Felwinter talks about all of the Iron Lords, even if it's just an optional thing. When your player scans a certain item, for example, Saladin would go on about Felwinter and what Felwinter did and the exploits of Felwinter and so on. And the same for Radagast and the same for Aphrodite and all of that. that stuff. It was the perfect time to explain characters within Destiny that we actually knew about. You don't have to be a lore fanatic to know who Fellwinter was because of the shotgun, Fellwinter's Lie. You have these weapons named after these Iron Lords, but there was never proper explanations of who these Iron Lords were, what they did, and I feel like that was a massive oversight by Bungie to not get into this. One of the main examples of this, for me, is when your ghost inquires about the Warmind Rasputin and asks Lord Saladin, won't Rasputin get involved?
How can you be so certain Rasputin won't get involved once we're inside?
The Vanguard still believe Rasputin to be simply a Warmind. He hasn't been that for a very long time.
That was very interesting. We've been getting small bits and pieces about Rasputin, but here's the thing. Why wouldn't you explain why he isn't a Warmind? Why would you stop there? The Bungie writers seem to be absolutely obsessed by giving us teasers of the lore. Oh, he hasn't been that for a long time, but I'm going to stop there and not actually explain anything interesting. I'm going to bring up interesting topics, but never actually delve into the nitty-gritty. And it's something that, if you had a wealth of information already, if the storyline within The Rise of Iron was well built out, you could allude to these other things but not fully explain them. But when the storyline is this lacking, quite frankly, it's just insulting that you wouldn't record some extra lines of dialogue further delving in to Rasputin. I would have loved to know that. But all of that aside, the biggest failing I would say with the story missions, and in fact all of the normal missions added within The Rise of Iron, is that Bungie didn't include anything to make them more replayable. We have a game with Destiny based off replayability and, the classic Destiny grind. You're playing Crucible over and over and over again to get those God Roll, Matador 64s. You're playing the Strikes over and over and over again to get Skeleton Keys to unlock that Strike exclusive loot. You're playing the Raid over and over and over again to complete your Raid collection. But with the story missions, you play them once, and that's pretty much it. Aside from the daily missions, in which, again, you only have one worth doing each day, you have no reason to go back and do the campaign in order again. It would have been absolutely fantastic if Bungie introduced some sort of heroic mode for the story campaign, where you can play and potentially even matchmake and do the entire story mode again, and maybe upon the completion you have some exclusive loot to go towards. It wouldn't be that hard to add a few exclusive story mode weapons and armor. That would be fantastic for replayability, and if these loot items dropped all the way to 400, another endgame activity, matchmaking or playing the story campaign again to get those end screen rewards. Why not? And the crazy part is that I have never heard anyone else bring up those ideas. I'm not trying to say I'm the most amazing or intelligent person ever. I'm just saying, if you agree with that, I hope we can get some traction here, because right now most of the missions have absolutely no reason to replay them outside if maybe they're the daily mission. Now let's continue with the PvE content offerings. Firstly, we have the addition of the Plaguelands Patrol Mode. I actually don't think this patrol mode is that bad. I actually think it's pretty good. We actually have a pretty large area to explore. We don't have that many new places, but you can go back to the remade areas of the Cosmodrome and explore, again, quite a vast area in patrol mode. However, the sad thing is that not many people go back to these old areas. The way the Plaguelands is designed, it's rather hard to actually go all the way back to these remade areas, and therefore, when you do go to the Plaguelands and you're trying to complete one of the Shiro bounties that, makes you do 10 patrol missions, by the way, that bounty is a great idea. It's something that actually is going to make people go and play the patrol mode, but when you're doing that bounty, most people just stay in the original area that you can kind of just keep doing that loop of and checking for those missions. They don't actually take the time to go back to the original areas. Maybe you do, but I wish there was an easier way to get from area to area to area, and therefore make people explore the vastness of the Plaguelands. With that being said, it is still very much the normal patrol modes. Only one new patrol activity was added, and it's the Siva symbol patrol mission activity, which has you go and kill a captain, and then maybe there'll be a dropship or two that come in, drop some enemies, and sometimes you have an axe, you can go and kill them. That's actually fine. It's a little bit more of a hectic mission than the, kill bounties, or certainly than the go somewhere and scan something bounties. Those bounties really need to have an increase to the amount of experience you gain from them, because there's no reason to do them right now. No one does those bounties. But they can't really change too much about the patrol missions with Destiny. I'm not going to bag on the patrol mode too much, although I certainly could complain because they didn't make it anything different per se. But again, they really can't change too much because it is what it is. Everything is built off the original Destiny, which was built to work on the Xbox 360. So we're going to have to wait for Destiny 2 to really see the patrol mode reimagined. With that being said, something else that was added into patrol mode was the Archon's Forge this time around. Somewhat similar to the Court of Oryx, the Archon's Forge is a pretty enjoyable activity that you can go and do. I actually like how it's not too insane. If I'm playing by myself and I don't want to go super hardcore, I will do Archon's Forge and I can still get some decent loot. However, I would say that in the state of the game right now, they should have definitely added one more higher difficulty. Add in expert, Siva offerings that are gold, and make 2 bosses spawn at the same time and raise the light a little bit, because right now if you're 380 light or above, which really isn't too hard to get to with the state of the leveling system, even a perfected Siva offering is not that difficult. And one higher tier that would be available, adding, better rewards as well potentially, or at least more chance to get rewards if you do that highest offering, that would definitely increase the Archon's Forge replayability and longevity. In that same vein, I really hope that they upgrade Court of Oryx soon, because forcing us to play Archon's Forge as the only interactive patrol mode activity is just going to make people get sick of it sooner. Please let us have the choice. Now, before we talk about strikes and the raid, there is also, as I mentioned earlier, some missions like the exotic quest missions to go and get the Galahorn and the exotic Kvostov that you can do that are outside the storyline. These missions are actually pretty interesting. You learn a decent amount about the lore, about the weapon itself, but again, replayability is an issue. There's really no reason to replay those missions once you get the exotic, and that is kind of unfortunate, but they are fairly well designed nonetheless. I actually wish more of the storyline missions were similar to these exotic quests. Moving on to the strikes. 3 strikes were added, only one, the Wretched Eye, was new. However, the other remade strikes feel very different, and they've brought forth all of the advancements they've made in strikes so far. For example, when you're playing the Sepix Perfected strike and you get to the part where there's normally a fallen spider tank, there can be Hive instead. That's pretty neat. It's going to make each time you play it a little bit different. However, something that is definitely not so good is the lack of improved strike exclusive loot. Although they did go back and add new class items to all of the different strikes, which was a great thing, they only added one new strike exclusive weapon, the Devil's Dawn Sniper Rifle, that spawns with predetermined rolls, so if you get it forever, to all 3 of the new strikes. There should be a specific weapon to each of these new 3 strikes. That's really going to increase replayability, and the weapons should spawn with random perks. That's even more so going to increase replayability as you're going for the gold rolls, or at least whatever your preferred roll may be. Unfortunately, playing strikes after the Rise of Iron pretty much feels exactly the same as playing strikes before the Rise of Iron, with lower drop rates because of skeleton keys and just like a 15% chance to get a new strike. Really wish they would have improved this process of the game a little bit more, because grinding heroic strikes was and is a legitimate part of the end game. Properly adding new strike exclusive loot, as I explained before, would have helped this. Now let's move on and talk about the Wrath of the Machine raid. Destiny's raids have really been the high point of the expansions on offer, and I think the Wrath of the Machine is no different. This is a very well designed piece of content in my opinion. Throughout the Wrath of the Machine, although it is maybe a little short and they could have fit maybe one more encounter in there, it's very, very enjoyable. The encounters that are in there are fun. They are different than other raids, certainly. They're very hectic. You often have to be on your game. Often the advice you're giving to people is just, look, get on your shit. See enemies faster. Take them out faster. You have to be paying attention. You can't be doing things complacently, and that, I think, is a good thing. Many people out there still haven't beat the Wrath of the Machine. And although I would say of the total raids on offer, this may not be the most difficult, especially because leveling up now is easier. You can get to max light before ever taking on the Wrath of the Machine, whereas before, like with the original raids with the Vault of Glass, you had to play the raid and then the loot that dropped from the raid was the only way to level up, so it was often much harder when you're going in there without ever beating it before. This raid, I would say, is very fair in how challenging it is. Furthermore, the loot the Wrath of the Machine offers is very good. It drops at a relatively high light compared to light level, and often it's very usable for the endgame. The Chaos Dogma, the Steel Medulla, you have some great weapons that are utilized a lot in the raid again and in other endgame activities because they are pretty damn good pieces of loot. The loot is also very unique, having weapons and armor that have perks that you can't get on weapons and armor from other activities. This definitely is a strong point for the Wrath of the Machine raid. With that being said, there are still problems with it. Firstly, the normal mode is really pointless. The loot only drops to 385, which is the same light that just normal purple engrams go to. So there really isn't a logical point to doing the normal mode raid anymore. You might as well just go straight to hard mode. That was the bad move, I believe. Furthermore, Aksis and Vosik Challenge. I think actually those challenge modes are decent. I think the Vosik challenge could have been a little bit better, but I don't mind the Aksis challenge mode. There are certainly a lot of people out there who have complained that these challenge modes just aren't challenging enough, but for most people, for the vast majority of people, they are going to be certainly challenging. You're going to have a pretty well-oiled group. And if you really want more challenge, try to two-man it. Like if you're so intense about the raid that you want the most challenging experience, you can go in there, use different weapons, use less teammates, and make it as challenging as you want to make it, frankly. However, it is very disappointing that there are only 2 challenge modes. There is no Siege Engine challenge mode, and I think that's unfortunate. I wish they would have done something with that encounter. That's just going to add more variety. And the last thing about the raid that I wanted to talk about was the Outbreak Prime. This is really the epitome of why I waited to do this review, because the Outbreak Prime quest and being a person who paid attention to the long process of figuring out what is going on and how to get this weapon was one of the legitimately most interesting and awesome community experiences I have ever been a part of in my life. I remember combing through the raid, spending hours in the server room trying all of these different theories, posting ideas to the Raid Secrets subreddit, and testing out other people's ideas as well. It was all very enthralling and very interesting, and the way you actually figured it out by this ARG system and people having to decode and put together this massive amount of images that showed us the path and showed us where to stand in that capsule room to finally start the proper sequence of things to get the Outbreak Prime, and then furthermore, the actual Outbreak Prime quest, having to complete all of these different puzzles, and it took a very decent amount of time, and the weapon you got at the end is, I think, fantastic. That thing has unbelievable damage output, especially in the Wrath of the Machine. That whole sequence of events lying behind the Outbreak Prime, the search for how to get it, the actual quest to get it, and the weapon itself, I feel, is a fantastic part of Destiny. It's something that other games have nothing similar to, and it's, you know, stuff like that is why I play Destiny. That is exactly why I play and love this game, and I just wish Bungie did that more often. Now that is really it for the PvE additions that the Rise of Iron brought to Destiny, and that is a little bit unfortunate. The Rise of Iron didn't do anything out of the norm in terms of what we expected for PvE content. It just added more of the same, with the one difference maybe being the Archon's Forge, but the Archon's Forge is kind of a remade Court of Oryx. I wish they would have added something like even the Prison of Elders. The Prison of Elders, at least that was different. I would love to see some sort of wave survival mode or something like that introduced into Destiny for PvE. Because one of the main problems of the state of Destiny right now is that once you've done the hard mode raid, like myself, it doesn't actually take that many completions of the hard mode raid to get all of the hard mode loot. The drop rates are pretty high. You're kind of stuck there, and aside from PvP, there's nothing really to spend your time in, your time perfecting. And again, a wave survival mode, seeing how high you could get competing for the worldwide leaderboards, etc., that's something to really sink your time in that the hardcore PvE players could actually do. Now let's move on to the PvP content added in the Rise of Iron. Firstly, there was 4 new Crucible maps: The Last Exit, Floating Gardens, Skyline, and Icarus. However, Icarus is a PlayStation 4 exclusive map. This has got to stop. Now, I actually understand why exclusives are done. It's very easy for people as consumers to just say exclusives are dumb, completely stop them. But if you're a development company and Sony walks in the door and says, here is X millions of dollars for just making a few pieces of content exclusive to our console, that is going to help hire so much more staff, and in the end, the hope is that they can use this compensation to make the game better for everyone. However, that's one thing if there's a couple of exclusive quests and exclusive ship and Sparrow, no one really minds that. But a map, when there's only 4 maps added in this $30 expansion, and 25% of it is on one console. Like, seriously, you're cutting 1/4 of the maps out of the game if you're an Xbox player. That is just not a good idea because that limits the content offering so much. Furthermore, the maps added into the game, although I don't dislike any of them a massive amount, I didn't love Floating Gardens Trials very much, but that being said, all of the maps I think are designed fairly well. They have fairly good flow to them, but also with Icarus I think being the best one, unfortunately for Xbox players, but also none of these maps stand out to me as absolutely incredible. I don't get Last Exit and become extremely excited. I'm not excited for any of these maps, and the reason being is because they really just blend in with all of the other maps within Destiny, with, again, sorry to say, but Icarus kind of being the only standout map just because it's in a cool location. You're on Mercury again at this solar facility, and it's kind of a cool place to fight at. But that should be done a lot more often. I don't know why Bungie doesn't take the extra step and have a little bit more interaction going on within these maps. Hive tomb ships flying through the map, really cool set pieces like fighting on a crashed spaceship, for example, or perhaps introducing more player-controlled elements, being able to have a rocket in the middle of the map or something and giving the players the option to launch that missile or rocket and have it fly into the air, and then obviously that's going to remove that piece of cover. Just some more interesting things in these maps. Now, yes, that sounds maybe a little bit gimmicky, but quite frankly, so many of the Destiny maps just flow into one another because they don't have enough unique factors in between them. Additionally to the maps, the Supremacy game mode was also added. This is really just a reimagination of the kill confirmed game mode in Call of Duty. When you kill a player in Destiny in this game mode, they're going to drop a crest. Picking up that crest is going to get points for your team. So you have to play very aggressively, very close range if you want to be picking up the points of the people you kill. It's a shotgun fest. Some people like this game mode, some people like playing very aggressively. It does have its merits. A lot of people hate this game mode, but that's fine. That's the purpose of a game mode. The people who like it can go and play it. The people who don't have to play it. So I think it's totally appropriate for an additional game mode within the Rise of Iron. Furthermore, in the sense of PvP, the Iron Banner and Trials of Osiris have been updated with the new loot. They haven't been remade in any way. The gameplay is actually still exactly the same, except for Trials of Osiris with Spooky Trials, and we maybe talk about that in a bit, and of course if it's on new maps. But the loot, again, is entirely new. Well, unless you're talking about heavies within Trials of Osiris. Really, Bungie, you couldn't make a rocket launcher and a machine gun for Trials of Osiris loot this time around? What's the deal with that? But that aside, entirely new loot for both of these options, and the new loot is actually quite good. We have several meta-bending weapons, the Clever Dragon, the Blind Perdition, in the game right now because of these updates to loot. We also have ways in both of these activities to get the old loot, which is actually pretty awesome. You have Year 1 armor dropping in Iron Banner actually, which is great. In Trials of Osiris, bounties will give you some of the old loot, which is great, so that is all good and done. However, something that's disappointing with the PvP offering of the Rise of Iron is that yet again, Bungie didn't stray from the norm. And you'll see this is a common complaint throughout this entire DLC, and it carries over into PvP as well. Supremacy is one thing. It's a little bit different than the other game types, but it's still classic Destiny PvP. Something that I'm talking about that is really different is Trials of Osiris. Trials of Osiris wasn't in the game at all, and then it was added with the House of Wolves. That was different. That was a huge addition to PvP. Like, that is an entirely separate thing. That is a very different game mode than normal PvP in Destiny. And it's very disappointing that we see, again, a $30 expansion not doing anything really outside of the norm in terms of PvP this time around. They could have added an entirely new game mode with Minions of the Darkness at the same time. Hive tomb ships and fallen skiffs dropping off enemies in the middle of a fight. You'd have random bosses that spawned, and killing that boss would give your team more points. So everyone is fighting each other to try to make sure that they don't kill those bosses that have spawned into the map. That would be awesome. How about a game mode where you start with no gear or weapons other than a placeholder auto rifle, and every time you kill an enemy, those enemies are going to drop green engrams that give you random green weapons or armor as you pick them up, so you're making your build as you're playing the game. You're putting on sniper rifles and random shotguns and pieces of armor as you kill more enemies. I think both of those game modes would be very cool, and the most important part is that they would be different than what we have right now. They would offer a totally different experience than the normal PvP playlists, and it's unfortunate that nothing like that was added. Now, moving on from PvP, we have the universal additions like new weapons and armor just straight into the game. These additions, although they're fine, again, we don't have any breaks from the norm. We have new pulse rifles like the B29 Party Favor, but it does the exact same damage, exact same rate of fire, and almost has the exact same stats as the Hawksaw. You had no new damage archetypes, no scout rifles that are very powerful, shoot very slow, kill in 2 headshots. Very easy to balance, by the way. You just slow down the rate of fire until they exactly equal an appropriate time to kill. We had no new auto rifles that shot at a faster or slower rate of fire or were in between any of the existing archetypes. We had nothing, again, out of the norm. And although having new weapons is neat, we didn't even have new perks this time around on the weapons. Some perks did get updated, which was great, but really none of them have still broken into the meta. Now, I will say that a lot of the exotics are very well designed. The exotic Kvostov is very cool. Being able to switch it between all of these different fire modes and rates of fire, it makes it feel like, 10 guns in one. The Young Wolf's Howl feels pretty cool as well, though it definitely needs a buff. But aside from the exotics, we really didn't get anything different from, again, the norm. With the exception, of course, of the new Iron Lord artifacts. Those were certainly an awesome addition that the Rise of Iron brought to Destiny. And I know for myself, it's hard to go without that elimination to sprint cooldown that the Memory of Yolder brings. But these artifacts didn't actually cause that much of a change to gameplay dynamics as I thought they would. When you're playing PvP, you don't really tell that often, aside from the one artifact that eliminates your super and gives you 2 grenade and melee charges, like who's using what artifact. It doesn't actually impact gameplay by the degree I thought it would. With that being said, I'm certainly not being negative on the artifacts. I think that they are purely positive. I think they're a fantastic addition to Destiny, and I'm very happy that they were added with the Rise of Iron. Without them, there would be certainly much less of a degree of gameplay differentiation when looking at the items added. So the exotics and the new Iron Lord artifacts really do change up gameplay, but pretty much everything else in terms of weapon and armor remains eerily similar to what we've already seen. In fact, a huge portion of the weapons added in the Rise of Iron were just remade Year 1 weapons. Now that is definitely the overall impression of the Rise of Iron DLC going into our final rating. The Rise of Iron expansion did provide a lot of much needed content to Destiny, and it was awesome to have one last large expansion before Destiny 2. I can't imagine this game without the Rise of Iron, because waiting all of this time until 2017 for Destiny 2 without the Rise of Iron would have been a lot to ask. So I am very happy that I bought the Rise of Iron. It's going to give me hours and hours of playtime. However, with that being said, I'm sure you guys have already picked up on the reoccurring complaint about this DLC. It just didn't break the norm. Aside from the raid, which of course was a different piece of content and feels different from other raids, we saw nothing out of the ordinary. There was no new weapon foundries. There was no new weapon perks retrospectively added into all of the roles so you could go back and get your old weapons again with new perks. There was no new proper game modes. There was no new completely different PvE activities. It was just more of the same. Now, more of Destiny is not necessarily a bad thing. As I said earlier, I'm going to get hundreds of hours out of the Rise of Iron because I like Destiny and I'm playing more Destiny. However, looking at this objectively, for a $30 expansion, that's not going to be enough. $30 adding just more of the same is frankly not going to be enough. And because of this, the Rise of Iron is suffering from the classic Destiny decline. After a new piece of content, people run through it and get bored pretty damn quick. You already see, only a few months after the Rise of Iron, people, in my comment section and other places complaining about the endgame, about the lack of content, saying that they've moved on to Titanfall or Battlefield or whatever, and that's all very fair because the Rise of Iron really didn't add anything substantially new other than the Wrath of the Machine to Destiny. Imagine if the Rise of Iron had added SMGs as a new primary gun type. How insane would that be? Going back and getting all of these new weapons, experimenting with all of these new builds, completely shifting the meta. That would be something very interesting, game-changing in fact. But the Rise of Iron did nothing like that. It stuck to the classic Destiny recipe. Now again, that isn't the worst thing in the world if you're a Destiny fan. But as a whole, I would say that the Rise of Iron expansion is a 6 out of 10. It's slightly above average, and most of that is due to the Wrath of the Machine. I am a Destiny fan, and I would recommend that you buy this expansion if you haven't already, if you are a Destiny fan. If you're someone who bought one of the, complete editions before the Rise of Iron came out, just had the 2 expansions and the Taken King, and you're really enjoying Destiny, pick up the Rise of Iron because it's more of what you're going to like. However, judging this objectively, it's not necessarily worth $30. If you can find the complete Destiny collection with the base game and, all of the expansions for around the price of a normal base game, that does make a little bit more sense. But again, this expansion is quite lackluster, and the main reason I'm making this video is not necessarily to tell you guys to buy or not to buy the Rise of Iron. I think the people who would actually like the Rise of Iron have pretty much already bought it, and the people who haven't are not interested in Destiny all or don't own it at all, which again, you're better off buying the complete collection. The main reason I'm making this video is for Bungie. I hope a random Bungie employee watches this because it's very important for the future of the Destiny franchise. We can't get a new Destiny game, we can't get Destiny 2 and then just get a bunch of large expansions that add more of the same. You're going to need to step it up in what you add with these large expansions, especially if you're going to be charging a premium over what most other AAA titles are charging for their expansions. You're going to need to add substantially new PvP game modes. You're going to need to add substantially new PvE activities. You're going to need to add entirely new weapon archetypes, entirely new weapon perks, entirely new gun types, like when melee weapons in the form of swords were added into the Taken King and sidearms were properly added with the Taken King. Why wasn't anything like that done with the Rise of Iron? That would have improved the content offering a lot more. And therefore, what you have is a 6 out of 10 for the Rise of Iron. And quite frankly, the cracks are already starting to appear. The Destiny community is already showing quite an interest in the next live update, because the most recent live update with Festival of the Lost was a failure and disliked by most of the community because all it was buying microtransactions. So you already have people waiting for the next content offering, Sparrow Racing. If that's a disappointment, we are not in a good place for Destiny entering 2017. The Sparrow Racing League really needs to be good, and again, that's a huge problem. We just had a major expansion and we're already at the point where huge portions of the community are saying, I'm not playing until Sparrow Racing, or I really hope Sparrow Racing is good. Sparrow Racing really has to be good to get me interested in this game again. We should still be enjoying and playing all the new stuff with the Rise of Iron, but we're already looking ahead. And that is, again, one of the downfalls of the Rise of Iron. With all of that harshness, I will say that I am incredibly looking forward to Destiny 2. What I said earlier in this video about Destiny as a whole being built to run on the Xbox 360, and you're still building off that extremely old architecture, still runs true. You can't add anything massive to this game because you're going to have to rewrite the code, you're going to have to rewrite the engine, you're going to have to rewrite so many things about it. Hopefully Destiny 2 can do this. It can improve upon the things that need improving upon. Again, now it's really impossible to rewrite the playbook entirely when it comes to some of this content. And although I do feel like my criticisms in this video were very warranted, take that into consideration when you listen to them. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. Now, if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you want to see more Destiny content from me, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at @RickHackis. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.